Hi, I'm Grace Lawrence Viekman, and today we're going to make a Czech pastry called collage, or collages. This recipe was given to me by my Aunt Helen Kovar, who is my mom's brother's wife, and Aunt Helen spent a Saturday with my sister and I making this recipe. This is a special treat for us because growing up my mom didn't make this pastry. She made strudels instead. And so when we went to relatives' houses, we were always so excited if they gave us collages to eat. They were a special treat for us, and today we'll show you how to make them. We're going to walk through the ingredients for making collages. So in this bowl, I have a half cup of warm water, a half teaspoon of sugar, and 4.5 teaspoons of instant yeast. And I've mixed that together already and then letting that rise a little bit. In this cup, I have 2 cups of milk, which I've scalded and added a stick of butter, or 8 tablespoons. And again, I've let that cool to room temperature. I also have a half cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 eggs, some additional butter for coating the collages, and then 7.5 cups of flour. We're going to use 7 cups of flour in the recipe, and the extra flour is just in case it's a little sticky and we need to add a little bit more. For the filling today, I've got some canned apricot filling that you can buy commercially, and then I've also made some prune filling, and this prune filling was a cup of soft prunes that have been pitted, a half cup of water, and I cooked them for about 15 minutes on the stove and then let them soften up, put them into a blender to grind them up, and added a little bit of sugar and some cinnamon. So that's a homemade filling. We're going to start mixing the dough, and then once we mix the dough, we're going to let it rest. So let's start mixing. In this bowl, as we mentioned before, I had half cup of water, 4.5 teaspoons of instant yeast, which is the same as 2 packets, and a half teaspoon of sugar. And I let that sit and proof while we scalded the milk. Now this milk is now cooled down to room temperature, and it also, I had put it in the stick of butter so that it melted and helped this cool down. So next we're going to add the milk to this mixture. And then we're going to add a half cup of sugar. And then we're going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. And then we're going to add 2 eggs. And I'm using a whisk to make sure that those eggs get broken down and incorporated well into the batter. Okay, next we're going to start adding our flour. And again, I have 7.5 cups of flour here, and I'm going to start with 7. And one of the tricks I learned making this when my kids were little is I always put a little bit of flour on the counter, and I mark how much flour I put in because I've had little kids run in and I've lost count. Usually you can tell though by the texture of the batter. So this is 1 cup of flour. And this flour has been sifted before we put it in the bag. 2 cups of flour. Cups of flour. And at this point, the batter is starting to get a little bit thicker, so I'm going to switch over to a spoon to do the rest of the incorporation. Four cups of flour. This is going to be a really soft dough. We're not looking to make a bread-like texture. And again, this is just the way that I grew up with my variation. And I know that collages in various regions are different. This is 5 cups. And our batter is starting to get thicker. Six cups. And now it's starting to form a nice ball. And I'm going to put slightly less than the seventh cup in here at this point, and we're going to use a little bit of the flour on the counter to do the kneading. Okay, I'm going to sprinkle that down. And this is probably a couple of tablespoons of flour. Now, one of the other things to keep in mind is that this dough has raw eggs, so make sure you wash your hands when you're handling the dough, both when you're after you're done kneading it and when you're done shaping. And now we're going to knead the dough. Just as an aside, this recipe makes about 24 to 30 collages, depending on the size that you make them. And you can always make a half batch if you have a smaller family or just don't want to deal with something this large. What we're looking for is that this dough stays together in a nice coherent ball, but we're not going to develop the gluten a whole lot because we want these rolls to be nice and soft. Now this is maybe different than collages you've had in the Czech Republic, or if you've had collages made by family and friends, but again, this is sort of what I grew up on, so we're going to try and make what our family we enjoy. So as you can see, this dough is starting to come together, and we'll just pick up these little scraps and make sure we incorporate them into the center so they get incorporated. And again, we're looking for a soft dough that holds together. I'll add a little more flour. And so this is probably about a half cup left in the bag. So again, just make sure you give yourself a little bit more flour. If the weather is warm and dry, you might not need as much flour. Okay, this is starting to hold together, and we're going to look for a smooth exterior. A little bit more flour so it doesn't stick. Okay, this is shaping up really nice. And I'd also like to thank my brother Larry and my sister Becky for allowing me to use their kitchen. This is actually in the home that I grew up in as a child. Okay, now let's take a look at this dough before we stop to put it so that it can rise. And what we're looking for here is, you see how it's holding together. It's getting nice and smooth on the outside, and this has probably been kneaded enough. I'll just give it a couple more rounds just because sometimes it's nice to do that. This is holding together really well. And again, it's a nice, soft, coherent ball. So the next thing we'll do is we'll be washing the bowl that we had we'll be greasing that with either some oil or some butter, and then putting a piece of plastic wrap or a towel over it and allowing it to rise double. Now the other thing that you can do is, if you're pressed for time, is you can make this ahead of time the night before and put it into an oiled bag in the refrigerator with a Ziploc top and let it rise in the refrigerator overnight. That's a really good way to get started in the morning, and then the dough is ready to go and to be shaped, and it doesn't take that long to proof. Now we've got this nice dough together, and we're going to put this into an oiled bowl. We'll make sure the top is really well greased, and then we're going to cover it with a cloth and put it in a warm place to double in size. And while that dough is rising, we're going to talk to Misha, who is from the Czech Republic, and she's going to talk about her business, the Czech Baker, and the pastries that she makes that are Czech pastries that were so wonderful. Today we're going to be talking to Misha. Tell us about yourself, Misha, and where you were born.
Hi, so my name is Misha Giancarlo Kotek, and I was born in Ostrava, Czech Republic. It is up in North Moravia, and it's very close to Poland and Slovakia.
Great. So what's the name of your business, and what is your specialty?
My business name is the Czech Baker, and I started with sourdough breads, and then I expanded into the Czech bakery goods. So there's kolache, vánočka, Czech Christmas cookies, poppy seed rolls, and any other items you can think of.
Yum. So what are the differences between the collages in the Czech Republic and America?
So as far as I know, the difference between the kolache here and the Czech Republic are the style of how they're baked. Traditional Czech kolache is a circle, and the topping is in the middle of it. Here in Minnesota or northern Minnesota, there is they kind of wrap them in, so they look like little wrapped rolls maybe. I know in South Texas or in Texas, they do them the same way as in Czech Republic, so they have them round with the top filling.
And you told me a story about why you think that they closed the collages here in Minnesota.
So back in the older days, when the gentleman would take the kolache to work with them, they would wrap them in the linens, right? And they would come home, and the filling would be all over the linen as they kind of carried it and moved it around. So I believe, or I was told, that they just wrapped the filling inside the dough, hide it, and therefore the linen was clean and would last a few days.
Well, that would make a lot of sense. So great. So how are the dough and the fillings the same or different from what you had in the Czech Republic?
As far as the dough, I think the difference, there's just very minimal. I mean, either use milk or you use water. It's, similar. Using oil versus butter, it's the same thing as well. But I think the biggest difference might come to flour. That, in Europe we have different types of flours than you guys do have here.
Are the dough and the fillings the same?
So I believe that mainly the dough is the same. There might be little differences in regards to using water or milk or using butter and oil. But other than that, it is a yeast-based dough, and it is basic baking dough. In regards to fillings, in Czech Republic, when I was growing up and back, the original was prune, poppy seed, and cream cheese, which we call tvaroh, which is actually a farmer's cheese here in America. And then you would find apricot off and on. But now here in America, I believe those three were basic as well, but it has evolved. So I offer blueberry, strawberry. There is also like cherry ones. Sometimes I have heard the lemon curd. I don't do that, but there's a lot of different options.
Okay, great. And then you were saying something about the dough. How is the dough and the flour a little bit different between what you had here in the United States and in the Czech Republic?
Okay, so we use, in Czech Republic, we have 3 different types of flours, and they kind of give you a different result, obviously, of how you use them. I can buy them here, but it's very expensive. So here, with my home business, I actually use bread flour because it does have a lot of the gluten, which gives you, nice and proper dough.
Okay. So let's see, I think we've already talked about the open and closed face collages. And how they came about. And then do you want to show us the pastries that you make?
Definitely. So the first one is the traditional Czech type collage, which is circled with the filling on the top. We have hřeben, which in translation that means comb, for combing your hair. And then we have a kapsa, which is a pocket, kind of like a turnover here in America. And then the last one is buchta. You can see it's kind of torn on each side because it's put in one container and then they're torn as they're used. Now the last one is Czech, which I didn't make because they didn't turn out. But those are the ones where you put all the four corners inside, kind of fold them in.
And what kind of fillings do these pastries have?
So I have twaroh, or the cream cheese. This one is actually nuts, walnuts. I have apple, and this one is probably prune.
Yum, looks really good.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about Sokol.
So today we're at the Czech and Slovak Sokol Hall. We are on West 7th Street in St. Paul, Minnesota. And this is basically where it all started back in, I believe, 1880s.
Tell us about how you make the dough.
So the dough I prepare with I start with warm milk and sugar, and then I add yeast in there. I actually use the fresh yeast. I have not been able to succeed in using a dry yeast. I have tried many times, but the fresh yeast seems to give me the best results. Like I mentioned before, I use the bread flour, and then for the oil is part of my stuff. I actually do not use whole eggs. I just use the yolks, and then I also add a little bit of lemon zest.
Yum. Okay. And then how you mix the dough, and then how many times does it rise before you start shaping it?
Yep, so I usually let it rise at least twice in a bowl, and then I separate it. I put it into little balls. Again, I shape them into balls, and then I let them rise one more time. Then I have a little device that I make the indent inside, and then I fill them, and then I bake them.
Okay, that's why they look so perfect. Yes,
Thank
good.
you.
Thanks. And in the Czech Republic, what do you think is the favorite type of collage?
I think poppy seed is widely popular. I haven't found it in here. I mean, rarely. I make them myself, but poppy seed is like a staple in Czech Republic. Mm-hmm.
Good. Anything else that you'd like to tell the folks that are watching this about the wonderful Czech pastries? If they were to go to Prague, where would be the best place to find a Czech pastry?
You know, as famous as they are when we live in America, in Czech Republic, they're just day-to-day goods,
Yeah.
you know. So any kind of basic grocery store, that's where you would find them. I mean, there's not a special store where they make kolache only. There's different choices or different types of kolache that are regional in Czech Republic. So there you might find them, like in Moravia, we have frgal, which is a kolache the size of pizza. So that's very big, and it usually has only one filling. South Czech or South Bohemia, they have a different one, chodský koláč, and that one has different types of fillings on there, and it's kind of really nicely decorated, so it's like an art as well. But other than that, regular grocery stores, that's where you can find koláč.
Okay, great. Anything else that you'd like to tell the folks that are watching?
If you have never been to Czech Republic, you gotta go.
Yes.
If you don't like sweets, go get a beer.
Yes. Pivo!
Pivo.
Our dough has been sitting for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on how warm it is. Or if it's been overnight in the refrigerator, it's doubled in size. And so what we're going to do now is turn it out onto the counter and portion it into 24 pieces to make the collages. And the dough will be nice and soft and pliable. And what I have here is a pan that's prepared. I have basically a silicone mat that I'm going to be using. And otherwise you can use parchment paper, or you can grease your pan really well. So this dough is nice and soft, as you can see. And I'll start using this to cut this up. I just have a cutter because I don't want to damage the counters. And again, we're going to be going for about 2 dozen. So this is okay. And we're going to take each of these and cut them into 3. And just kind of given an eyeball. And if they look like you haven't gotten quite the right amount for each one, then just take a little dough from the other ones and then put them so that they're about approximately the same size. Okay, here's 12. Now we'll make the next ones. Okay, now this one looks a little small, so I'm going to take a little bit of dough from this one and put it there so they're about the same size. Now we have 24 of these cut out, and what we're going to do is cover them again and let them rise until they're double, so they're soft and pliable as we shape them and we put the filling in. Our collage has been sitting for between 15 and 20 minutes. We've covered them with plastic so that they don't dry out. And now we're going to fill them, we're going to shape and fill them and get them ready for baking. And what we'll be doing is making half prune and half apricot. As mentioned before, this is a commercial apricot filling, and the prune filling is about a cup of prunes that have been soaked in water and then cooked between 15 to 20 minutes until they were tender, cooled, and then run through a blender, added a little bit of sugar and a half a teaspoon of cinnamon to that. So as you can see, this dough is really nice and soft. I'm going to be patting it out and adding about a teaspoon of filling and bringing the edges across and making a square. Putting these into the pan. Now these are a closed face collage, and when we were talking to Misha, we asked her about why some of them are open and some of them are closed. When my husband and I were in the Czech Republic, when we'd go to the grocery store to buy collages, they were always the closed face or the open face collages. And Misha thought that maybe the reason that the United States has closed face collages in some areas is because it was a way to keep the filling from leaking out and spilling into the contents of the lunch buckets for the people that were eating them in the fields or in the factories. And again, you might want to pinch them. If the dough is really warm, sometimes they'll tend to spring open, so you just... Now we have a tradition at my house that if the collage comes open and you can see the inside, they're called a reject, and that's the first people that are waiting for these to come out of the oven, that they get the first dibs. Now, talking to some other folks, one of the things that they liked is if you could let a little of the filling peek out so that you can tell what kind of collage it is, so you're not getting stuck with something that you really don't like. Some people really like the prunes, some like the apricot. Another flavor that I make is a cherry collage. And in the springtime, I've made rhubarb collages. And when I make rhubarb collages, I take about 2 cups of chopped up rhubarb, and I cook it until it is just tender but not falling apart. Mix it with some sugar and a little bit of cinnamon, and use that and some tapioca as a thickener, and use that and let it cool until it's thick, and then use that as a filling. Now you probably wonder, why am I not just putting them in a row? I like to put the bigger collages on the outside because they tend to bake a lot faster, and this way everything gets done about the same time. Again, pinch it together, pull it across so you have a nice X. As you can see, this dough has been sitting out for a while, so it's nice and warm, easy to stretch. One of the other kinds of collages that we had when we were in the Czech Republic are poppy seed. And again, some of my family really likes the poppy seed and some of them don't. And today I just decided I would make the fruit flavored ones. Here's one that's going to be a reject. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. One more. We've got 12. Let's see, let's do a big one. So that's the outside. If you're making a small batch of collages, like only a dozen or so, I found that you can, if you take the filling, the can filling especially, and put it into a airtight bag, you can freeze it and then use it on subsequent batches of collages. Okay, now let's switch over to making the prune collages. This one will end up being another reject, I can tell. This one just doesn't want to stay closed. So sometimes you can squeeze them back together like that. Again, it just kind of depends on how warm the dough is too. So how well they'll stay together. I'm going to have to squeeze some of these together a little bit more because I need to get another row in here. This stage is a fun stage. If you have the young children, you can get them going on the padding and the filling. And if you're trying to teach your children how to bake, this is a fun time to get your little kids involved too. Now this one, we're going to pad a little bit more because this is one where we took some dough from one of the other ones to sort of make a bigger one. And we want to make sure that sticks together really well. There we go. This one will be peeking out a little bit. And then I've got 3 more. Tuck that in there. Okay, and our last one. Looks like we turned out with just enough filling for the 12. So again, if you're going to make a full batch of the prune ones, you probably want to use 2 cups of fruit. Just the unsweetened printed prunes. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to brush these with some melted butter. And since the house is a little bit cooler, this has started to coagulate a little bit more. We'll just brush this, and then we're going to brush these again once they come out of the oven and bake. Now the next thing we'll do is we'll cover this tray with plastic wrap, put it in front of I usually put it in front of the oven that I've heated to 400 degrees to get ready for baking. And in about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, they'll be ready to go in the oven because they'll start to have almost doubled in size. And so you want to let these rise until they're almost doubled in size. And then we'll do the baking. And the baking is for between 15 to 20 minutes. I usually rotate the pan halfway through to make sure that I have even browning. And I have this one that doesn't want to stay shut. So this is obviously going to be a reject because the filling will be poking out. Or it'll just be an open-faced collage like you'd get in Prague. As I mentioned, we'll cover them with some plastic to make sure they don't dry out. Just reuse that. And then we're going to put them into a nice warm spot. And the next step we'll do is we'll come back and we'll do the baking. And then the fun part, the eating. Our collages have been rising now for between 15 and 20 minutes. I'm going to take the plastic off. One of the things you want to make sure is that you rotate them if you've got it sitting in front of the hot oven. And the oven is at 400 degrees. It's been at that temperature for a few minutes since the time we got them ready. And now we're going to put them in the medium rack of the oven to bake. And these bake between 15 and 20 minutes. So what we'll do is set the timer for half that and then rotate them halfway through. And in 15 and 20 minutes, we can see how they taste. And we've just taken our collages out of the oven where they've been baking for about 15 minutes. Now your oven may vary, so it could be anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes. And the other thing we did is about halfway through, we turned the pan around so that there was even baking on either side. And as you can see, the tops are brown. They've risen a lot more. We have what we call rejects, and my family loves the rejects because as soon as I put the next coat of butter on them, they'll be coming into the kitchen to ask, can we have a reject? So now I'm going to put some butter on just to make them. It helps keep the tops of the collages soft. And as you can see, we have the apricot ones in here and we have the prune ones here. And as I think I mentioned before, some people like to have a little bit open so they know what kind of collage that they're getting because they may not like a specific flavor like the prune or the poppy seed. Okay, I'm going to turn this pan around and then we'll finish off. Now I think the other thing you can do is, these are pretty good sized collages, so if your family likes a smaller version of the collage, you can cut the dough into smaller pieces and make more of them. And again, this was cut so that it makes about 2 dozen or 24 collages. So there we have it. There's our collages ready to share with family and friends and those that you love. And we hope that you enjoyed this time of making collages, and Spani Bohem.